Howdy folks, my name is Ben Franklin, aka Yellowstone Ben, the Chess Bear. Now today we're going to look at the board and pieces. This video is intended for beginners. If you have some experience, you could try out a game at solitaire-club.com. I'll put a link below the video. Okay, I'll hand you over to my assistant Robin, who will cover how to play chess.
Thanks, Ben. So today we'll be running through basic chess for a beginner. In front of us, you can see a chessboard with the pieces ready to go. And first of all, if you're playing online, the board will always be orientated correctly. But if you're playing with a physical chessboard, you will need to check that the bottom right corner is a light square. Okay, so if you're playing black, that would be this square. Okay, and you'll notice that the chessboard has a symmetry. You have the king and queen in the center, and moving out from there, you have next to the king and queen, there are the bishops, and then the knights, and finally in the corners are the rooks. Now, which way round does the king and queen go? Well, the best rule to remember is the queen always goes on her own colour. So the white queen goes on a white square, and the black queen goes on a black square, on a dark square. The queen is usually identified by a multi-pronged crown. The king is usually identified with a cross on his crown. The bishops looks to me a bit like a bishop's mitre, a bishop's hat. The knight looks like a horse. That's fairly easy. And in the corner are the rooks. And the rooks derives from a Persian word meaning chariot. And that's possibly a better description for a movable piece rather than a castle which doesn't move much at all. Anyway, chess originated as a military strategy game, and the front line of pawns, the word pawn is apparently derived from Latin term for foot soldier, which seems a good analogy. There are just two players in chess, black and white, and play alternates between white and black until the game ends. And the aim of the game is to capture your opponent's king, and this is known as checkmate. Let's look at each of the pieces and how they move. So on the front line are the pawns. The pawns can only move forward. The first move can be one or two spaces forward, but after that they can only move one space at a time. So the first move, if say black was going next, the black could move one or two spaces. Now play goes to white, and white may choose to move another pawn forward, and if it's a new pawn, it can move one or two spaces forward. Okay, the pawns can take other pieces that are immediately diagonal to the pawn. So in this example, play now passes to black, and black can consider taking any piece that is immediately diagonal to the pawn. And you can see that this pawn is immediately diagonal. So let's take this white pawn, and what happens is the black pawn will replace the white piece. Okay, so now play switches to white. It's white's turn to go, and white might choose perhaps to bring out a knight. It's regarded as a good idea to bring out your knights and your bishops at an early stage. Now, why is that? Because you don't want your knights and bishops to be behind a wall of pawns. You want them to be out in the field of play to mount attacks and to help in defense. And you can see that by moving out this knight to this position, I am now potentially threatening this black pawn, but I can also, if I let's just move another piece up. Now play, because black has just gone, it's now white to play, and you can see that this knight could move here, here, or it could indeed take this pawn. Okay, so initially pawns can move 1 or 2 spaces, but once they've taken their first move, they subsequently move just one space at a time. If a pawn makes it to the opposition end of the board, then the pawn will be promoted to a piece of your choosing. So let's just demonstrate that quickly. If I just move some pieces forward. Okay, so now the pawn has reached the 7th rank, and it now has the option of taking either the bishop or the rook. Now, in this situation, it would be better to take the rook, because if the pawn were to take the bishop, on the next go, the black would immediately take the queen. So it makes sense for the pawn to take the rook, which is also the higher value piece. So let's do that. And you'll see that because we've reached the back line, I'm given the choice of promoting the pawn to one of these pieces: bishop, the rook, the knight, or a queen. Now, the queen is the highest value piece and the most versatile piece, so you would normally choose that in most circumstances. Okay, so that's the pawns covered. Next, let's look at the rooks. The rooks are in the corner of the board, and the rooks can move along the verticals and horizontals. So we call the verticals the files and the horizontals the ranks. So if we were to move this, let's see, I'll just move that up. So if I were to move this rook here, and I'll just move a random move, and now it's white to move, and you can see that white has the option of moving this rook anywhere along this file, but it can also move back to its original space. And you can see that let's just move this rook to here, and again I'll just move a random move, and now on the is now white's move to go again. And you can see now that white has the potential to move anywhere along this rank and along this file as far as the next piece. So this rook with the circle around it is threatening the black knight here, and it's also threatening this black pawn here. But the white rook may also choose to move anywhere in between. So, for example, the white rook could move here, for example, and that would be threatening the black queen. But it is protected by the knight. Okay, the rooks potentially can control up to 15 squares, so 8 squares along the rank and 8 squares along the files, are giving it a total of potentially 15 squares that it can potentially control. And so they are quite a valuable piece, and they are given a value of 5 units. So that the pawns are given a value of 1 unit, the rooks are given a value of 5 units. Okay, the next piece I'd like to look at is the knight. Now the knight can move in an L shape. That's 2 squares along the ranks or files and 1 across. And I'm marking out the possible places where this white knight could move to. So you can see that it is threatening this black pawn. It's also protecting this white rook. But it could equally go to one of the empty squares marked with a circle. Okay, and the knight is given a value of 3 units. So rooks 5 units, pawns 1 unit, knights 3 units. The next piece I'd like to look at is the bishop. And let's just move, I'm not sure who is to go, let's just move that up 1. The bishop can move diagonally forward or backwards. So it's white's to go. Let's move the white along this diagonal to this position here. Now that puts the black king into check. So this white bishop is now threatening the king. It's not too difficult for black to get out of this, but it is a threat. So black now has to respond to this threat, and it does have a number of things it can do. But let's just stick with the looking at the bishop and how it moves and where it can move. So the bishop can move anywhere along the diagonals until up to another piece. So this white bishop can, in this position, can potentially move to these spaces. And if you consider that were the bishop to be in a central position, so one of these 4 squares here, then it could control up to 14 squares. So it could control potentially the 8 squares on the long diagonal and up to 7 squares going in the other direction, and deducting the common square, that leaves up to about 14 squares as its potential sphere of influence. It is given a value of 3 points. So we have rooks 5 points, bishop 3 points, knights 3 points, pawns 1 point. Okay, the last, I'll just move, so just to deal with this situation. So the black king is in check. So the black king has to get out of check. It can't do anything else. So there's a number of things it can do. It can either move, it can move perhaps the bishop over here, which perhaps would be quite a good idea. Also considering that the that's the black queen is being threatened by this rook. So probably quite a good idea to move something in between. Okay, so the next piece I'd like to look at is the queen. The queen is or acts like a combination rook and bishop. So if we hover over this white queen, you can see that potentially it can consider moves both vertically, horizontally, and diagonally. Now, providing its way is not blocked. So in this particular situation, the queen is somewhat boxed in by its neighbours, by this white pawn, the white bishop, and the white king. But it can consider, it is threatening this black knight, but it can only consider these squares marked with a green circle. So the queen is the most versatile and important piece after the king, and it is given a value of 9 points. Okay, finally, the last piece to discuss is the king, and the king is the most important piece on the board. The king can move just one space in any direction, forward or backwards, providing its way is clear. So in this particular case, for the white king, the king could consider moving here, here, or here. It can't move anywhere else because its way is blocked. The king can take anything that is immediately adjacent to it, so including the diagonal. So any piece, any opposition piece within one square of the king can be taken. And the king doesn't have a value because once the king is taken, once the king falls, the game is over. Okay, all the pieces have the potential to take an opponent's piece, but they can only take if the opponent's piece is in sight of the particular piece. Let me give you an example of that. So white may open by pushing their pawn forward, and let's say, for example, black responds by pushing their queen's pawn forward. Now it's white to play, and this white pawn can now see this black pawn and could take the black pawn. Because it is in sight, the pawns can only see one space along the diagonal. So let me give you another example. So white may choose to pull out their queen to this position, and black may respond like that, for example. Now, white's queen can now see this black knight, and so could take it. Now, why wouldn't the white queen take the black knight? Well, because the black knight is protected by this pawn and this pawn. So although white would gain a knight worth 3 points, it would then lose. It would then be taken by a pawn and lose 9 points. So that's why it wouldn't do that. I'll just also show you in this situation, white may well push their bishop to this position, and you'll see that in this position the bishop is threatening the king, and the king is said to be in check. And in this situation, black has to respond to the check. It can't do anything else. It has to respond to the check. So in this situation, it would probably push pawn forward, so blocking the check and simultaneously threatening the bishop. So in this situation, probably white would either push back their bishop or move it somewhere else. Okay, I just want to demonstrate a quick game just to show how some of the pieces, how a game often develops. And this particular example will be, it's called Scholar's Mate, and it's being delivered by white. And this often starts with white pushing their king's pawn onto this space here. If I just explain quickly, this is called E4, and the notation is called algebraic notation, and the files are labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and this is always from white's perspective, and the ranks are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what I've done, I've pushed the white pawn to E4, and black often responds by matching that. And it's always a good idea to develop your pieces, so bring out your bishops and your knights at an early stage, and so white may well bring out their bishop to this position, threatening this pawn here, which is regarded as a weak pawn, being only defended by the king. Black may well respond by bringing out their knight, which protects this black pawn here. Okay, and white could then move their queen out to here, so also threatening this same weak pawn. So there's a real threat here of checkmate on the next move. Now, what can happen is black may not understand the gravity of the situation and may simply bring their knight out, so threatening the queen, and that may seem a reasonable thing, particularly in bullet chess where you don't have much time to think, but it doesn't protect you, because the next move is simply to take this pawn, and it is checkmate then. So that's an example of a short game. The king has nowhere to go, and there's no piece that can defend against this attack, and that is known as the Scholar's Mate. Well, I hope that was useful. Please leave any feedback in the notes below the video. I'll hand you back to Ben.
Thanks, Robin. Now you have the basics. You could learn more from our basic strategy video, or head over to solitaire-club.com to try out a game. There are 3 skill levels to try. If this video was helpful, please click the like and subscribe. Bye for now.